home games. That is Steve Milton from the Hamilton Spectator. Rick Zamperin from 900 CHML. I'm Scott Radley from the Hamilton Spectator and 900 CHML. Steve, we learned last week that a bill has moved now very quickly through the House of Commons regarding single game betting on sports events in this country. We've never had that before. You've been able, people who do pro line or whatever, know you can do multiple games, bet on a Jays game, bet on a Leaf game, and you have to win all three or whatever, but never single game betting. On balance, because there are going to be benefits, there are going to be detriments. On balance, is this a good thing if this is made legal in Canada?
On balance, okay, and I'll take two balance here. One is economic, and in the field that we work in, which is sport, it's a good thing it was coming, and I would say it was accelerated. Like I've said like we all say about anything in this pandemic, it accelerates trends that were already happening, and that's what's happening here. So this will be very, very helpful to get a few extra people in the stands, particularly for the CFL. That is very, very helpful. On balance, economic or socially as a nation, we're already heading this way. It's not a good thing, really, because you don't want an economy based so much on betting, but it's already there, and it's particularly provincial. It really helps with health and all of those kinds of things. But anything that can stimulate an addiction, and we live in an addiction society, is not a good thing. But it was already heading that way. This thing's got to be, you saw what happened even with lotteries before betting became endemic in this province as an institutionalized item. You saw how many people got addicted to that, and that was just for lotteries. At least the commissions are putting in protective and help groups and all of those kinds of things. So on balance, good thing, particularly I think for the CFL.
Rick?
I think this is long overdue. We have it in certain fashions with, certain betting websites where you can pick out a game. You can bet on a quarter, you can bet on a half or a period. You can bet on individuals. But for the most part, OLG hasn't been able to do that. I think it's a good thing for one simple reason. I understand the addiction, angle, and people who have that type of addiction are going to find a way to
Yes.
feed that addiction. But as a whole, whenever you're watching a game, whether you're at a stadium or at home or, with a group of friends at a bar, when we're able to do that again, it's always a little more interesting when you have a stake in that game financially. Whether it's $5 or $100 or whatever the dollar amount is, it's just a little bit more interesting. You get a little bit more on the edge of your seat when you have some skin in the game. So I think single game betting is going to do that. It's going to attract more people to, I think, watching and consuming sports, number one. But number two, if leagues can tap into this as well, if the government says, maybe a portion of this goes to leagues because we're feeding this big monster in terms of betting on these athletes, betting on these gladiators, I think there could be a win-win here. I don't think we're going to get there right away, but I think sometime down the road, leagues should say, let's get a little bit of that action as well.
So Steve is sort of mixed. Rick is largely in favor. I'm going to be the guy who is the social prude and say I'm opposed to it. And for a couple of reasons. One of them is the money that is gathered from this, and to Steve's point and Rick's point, it does generate interest in those teams. So you can drive up interest ratings, maybe people in stands, as Steve says, but the money from this is not going to be designated back in any way to any of these leagues to help them. So from a purely direct financial point, it doesn't help any sports teams. But mine is a way bigger thing than that. And as you say, it could be people in the seats, but not directly.
It will eventually help those teams. They'll get a cut of it somehow.
It certainly could. There's no question about that. The downside to me is this, and Rick and Steve both just have touched on this. It's the fact that anytime a government legalizes something, it is essentially endorsing it and saying this is now positive behavior. Now, we may not believe that. We may be smarter than that. But look at what happened with the cannabis legalization in this country. It was, as you both say, already going on. No question, people were doing it. There was a black market, and now we're directing some of that money into government programs. But if you look at the numbers, the use of cannabis in this country legal use of cannabis has risen every year that it's been legal. The endorsement of it tells people this is something that's safe, it's fun, it's good, it's fine, there's no downside to it. If the government tells us it's okay, well, they wouldn't hurt us. They wouldn't do anything that lets us. So it's not the people who are responsible that get hurt by this. There are people who are able to do this stuff safely. It's the endorsement of it and the ease of it, I think, that will hurt some people with, as you say, Steve, with the addiction stuff. And the money now we take from them goes into programs that will ultimately just help to serve their addictions and their problems later on.
Well, that's that part of it because it's a percentage basis.
Anyway, I'd give it a no.
Yeah, I mean, I get that point, and you're right. And we saw that's the history 100 years ago with the lifting of the prohibition on alcohol. Suddenly, it's actually in your house, right? And those kinds of things. Pot's a little different story, and I don't want to get into the debate of that, given my, obviously, I came out of the
obviously we can tell just by looking.
the hippie era, but there's another thing I'll just say about pot is that you're more likely to answer surveys that you do it now that it is legal too. I'll say that
they're talking about purchasing.
What?
They're registering this by the amount that has been purchased, and maybe that just means
what did you have to compare it to?
Legally.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, people are more and more getting in, and then part of that is use factor. But I think you're right. I think there are social problems here, and they have to be monitored. And I've got to give to some degree. And addiction people would tell me that I'm wrong here, and fair on them because they studied a lot more. But you got to give some degree of respect to the people who kind of control. You see that and they shut people out if you've been doing it too much. It's got to be monitored, and that's one of the problems with moving some of this through so quickly.
Not everybody is going to get addicted to it. I'm not arguing that for a second. It would be a small number. It's
a horrible addiction in many, 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 many ways. It's the worst one because you really can't drink your house away overnight.
Right.
You could, even with the worst you could kill yourself overnight with many of the new drugs that are on the street, but it's pretty hard to bankrupt yourself overnight. Now, you're not going to do that by betting on a CFL game. You're not going to bet, but I'm saying gambling in general, you can actually lose everything you have overnight. Because
there's another angle to this as well. And, some of the critics to this legislation had brought this up, and I can't really agree with it. And it's the whole throwing of a game, because now you can bet on a single game. Are these athletes going to, bet on it, or someone connected to them know that, this team or this individual is going to throw the match or throw the game? In today's high octane athlete in terms of what they get paid, I really can't see that happening. You're not going to convince a multi-million-dollar athlete or set of athletes to throw a game because you're betting on that match.
And it's hard to throw a football game. A lot of things, but it's a lot easier with basketball and those kinds of things. You have to watch the lower paid leagues.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So the CFL would become the league.
Could be.
Not saying it happened. That would be the league where it could, but as you say, it's way harder in football for one person to have that kind of impact on a game.
Well, take a look at what FIFA does. FIFA does, and nobody mentions it in this country, but the CPL being now an elite league falls under the FIFA guidance rules, which means that FIFA has former bookies, a whole bunch of them in Europe, monitoring all of the leagues, particularly the ones that are lesser paid, for looking any kind of action, from anywhere around the world. They look for excess action. Now, and CPL isn't. They're not worried about it in any ways, or even do they acknowledge it, but they have to be because they are part of this.
But Steve, wasn't there a gambling scandal a few years ago? Not the CSA, but involving a minor Canadian league.
It was the professional league at the time, which is why it's an outlaw league. That was one of the factors of it being an outlaw league right now, which is the league that the Hamilton Steelers, they weren't playing in it at the time, but it's the league that the Hamilton Steelers used to play in the 90s, is now an outlaw league. In the early 2000s. And that's the reason, Scott. And wasn't for a lot of money. So they really watch those games. They watch the second tier of the Asian leagues, the second tier. They watch those really, really, really close. But it's hard to get to a football.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be minor leagues either. I mean, Juventus, one of the biggest European soccer teams in the history of this planet, was embroiled in a match-fixing scandal 5, 6, 7 years ago. So,
Right.
I mean, it happens at the top of the top as well.
And that's the other end of the scale. And why it happens there is that sometimes the shift in money before a game can get lost a little bit because there is so much being bet on it, right? There's not going to be a whole bunch bet on the CFL or the CPL. So you'd notice any kind of shift. You'd pick that up in a hurry. Because here's the other thing I think it does. It takes away that kind of betting that are prop bets. Like a lot of people bet props on leagues now, right? So you're not betting on the team. I mean, it doesn't take away those kinds of things you bet because you got a fantasy league team or you're betting on a prop within the game. So you're not really betting on your team winning or losing, right? So,
yeah. And again, you know what, I just want to get back to my point because I know there are people, I guarantee you people are listening saying, well, we have the liquor store. Why do we do that if people could be addicted? Fair point. And we had now, as you say, have cannabis and we have other things. The description of the way that what they're looking to allow, where it's not even just single games. It's, as Rick sort of mentioned, you could sit there and you could bet on a single pitch or you could bet on that bat or and you're at your computer, at your laptop, and it's just boom, hit a button, boom. Okay. Oh yeah, I'll take this. If we make it so easy, the one thing with the liquor store now, COVID has allowed, I don't know if they do delivery, but they have pickup, but you still have to make an effort to get the stuff. It doesn't
what I'm against grocery stores having it or against convenience stores having it.
Yeah, but if you now have gambling, and again, maybe I'm just a prude, but if you have gambling where you can just sit in front of the TV on your laptop and just keep hitting buttons, as Steve says, you could suddenly, by the end of a game, discover how much money you've spent without really realizing it. What I'm saying is I'm not entirely opposed to gambling. It's not, I'm not saying never have gambling. I don't know. We want to make it so easy that it's almost easier than any of our other vices that we have in our society that we do say are legal and allowed. And that's what this would do, it seems.
You could see that somebody got a heads up on this. You guys are all on the network. And if you noticed how the increase in Bodog
Huge.
how many they're sending out. And almost every time there's one with about a CFL bet in there.
Yeah.
Lots of things. Let us know. What do you think? Do you agree with single game? You may be an avid fan of this idea. That's cool. Tell us. Comment down below. You may say, no, I really don't like the idea. Betting, okay, but let's not make it so easy that it becomes a problem for people. Let us know. Comment, subscribe, hit notifications. We'd love to hear from you. Talk to you soon.